My name is Janelle Young. I go by JY Originals. I am an artist, painter, muralist, and community leader. I am a public artist, so what I do is essentially murals and artwork that's outside. And I'm currently based in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, but I've done work all around the country. I've done a lot of work in New York City, where I used to live, and I've done shows as far as Sydney, Australia. I consider myself a community artist, and essentially that means that I create work for the people. And intentional placemaking is something that I take really seriously. Um, I think that everything should be reflective of the community or the context in which I'm creating. So maybe that's getting feedback from the residents or students or just community members and leaders, advocates as well. Or that could mean doing a specific program that involves kind of artistic creation, flow of ideas, collecting memories, storytelling, any of those things that will provide context for the work that I'm doing. The folks in the community are usually the recipients of my work because I do public art. So it's really important for me to, take on the responsibility and due diligence of things like community outreach, thinking about sustainability when it comes to materials, equity, especially access to the different things that I'm presenting, and also making things accessible for differently abled people. When it comes to equity and access, as far as art is concerned, the one thing that I really love is the fact that public art is free. You don't need a ticket to get in. You don't need to pay to go to a museum to see an exhibit. It is accessible to the public. Um, there's also kind of this important part about where public art is placed and if it has easy access to those areas, such as, a downtown area. I've done a lot of work in cities, and it's very important to know if the space is somewhere you can walk to, if you can bike there, if you can take the bus or public transportation, who's going to be seeing this work and who's going to interact with it. There is also, kind of on the artist side, the idea of creating welcoming canvases for underrepresented artists, such as myself. That can be women, that can be Black and Brown artists, just anyone who may not have the experience or the access to get a hold of such a large canvas. So the idea for me is to show that I can take up space and encourage other artists to have the courage to go out there and do the same. Take advantage of the opportunities that are available. And the challenge can oftentimes be, in that equity piece, the startup costs of proving that your ideas can work on a large scale without necessarily having that experience, or not knowing where to go for the resources to complete a large scale project. And how do you really get to the next step if you never get a chance to show that you can work at a high quality level like that? A lot of dream projects for artists come from being backed by the city or a private brand or company. And as with anything, there are benefits and burdens to this type of partnership. Now, I've had the pleasure of working with the city of Pittsburgh, also the city of New York, and a lot of private companies as well for large scale projects. And I've learned that there is a clear need for a mutual benefit, and that can be really difficult for artists. Usually, that's something very measurable, and it's really important to figure out what KPIs are appropriate for the project that artists are working on. It's really hard to measure something like the impact that you have on a community versus the monetary benefit for a company or the city. There's also usually a learning curve for a lot of businesses regarding working with artists. Sometimes it's because this is their first time working with artists. Other times it's because they're just used to doing something a certain way, working with certain businesses. And there's quite a difference with how people see the creative process, also understanding how to pay an artist, what timeline they should be working on, and really understanding and respecting the profession of art for what it is. There are also times where art is seen as an afterthought, and it's unfortunate because it leads to a lot of missed opportunities. I see a lot of businesses now taking advantage of using the work of artists earlier in the process, really engaging them, and then coming up with a much more meaningful project or idea than if they were to slap art onto the end of it. Some of the really awesome benefits of working with the city or any other private company, the resources usually are really great, something that the artist can tap into. Also, the high visibility, especially with media, or maybe it's a really prominent location. And then there's the respect that is gained through doing sanctioned projects and just having a resume builder. Then you build this network for yourself as an artist, and you're able to leverage that for the future. On the subject of temporary placemaking, there is definitely a cultural shift toward more support for the arts just across the nation. Also, the need for large scale art, such as murals and public art, is widely understood now. The one thing that is probably hanging up a lot of cities right now is the idea of temporary installations being the norm for artists. Um, it is an awesome opportunity to have, rotating art in certain areas and for certain projects. However, the next step, in my opinion, is to go move toward more permanent opportunities for artists. There is definitely a struggle to, grasp all your content and get people to see your work in the short period of time it may be up, whether that's, a couple of months or a couple of weeks. You really want to get the exposure that will help you in the next step of your career. And so I think there's that piece of it. Also, understanding the amount of work that goes in on the back end. Some artists may work on a piece for 6 months planning, and then it's only temporarily available to the public for 3 months. So I think there's a way to kind of extend that and stretch it out, and also to groom artists to be able to handle more permanent installations. What does that process look like to prepare an artist to handle that kind of work?